First of all, thank you very much for having me, Arda. Thank you for the invitation. One, it's great because I've been speaking to people here for a couple of days now, and unfortunately, not many people know about SimilarWeb, and as I used to be in charge of marketing, I guess I'm to blame. And I guess the second reason is Istanbul'u seviyorum. I hope I said that correctly. But this is an absolutely great city, and what I've heard so far at the conference, really well done. I think it's one of the few places I've seen connecting what happens in the Middle East and Turkey. Because what we tend to see in Europe and in the US is very, very different. I'm based in London, and that's really my point of reference. So whenever I do that, or whenever I speak about something, it will probably be in reference to that. So what does SimilarWeb do? Very simply, we measure the web, and we've recently moved into apps as well. So we also measure the mobile world. And I guess one of the questions we get is, how do we do that? Before I get into that and tell you our entire story, some very, very general stats about us. We were founded in 2009. We went through 2 pivots. It was a very, very painful process. So if there are any entrepreneurs out there, you don't always get it right the first time. Try again. Third time is a lot easier. I personally have opened up 2 companies and went bankrupt twice, and I'm still standing. We've raised $25 million from Naspers. I don't know if you know about Naspers. I guess with the Marcofoni deal, pretty much everyone here has heard about them. And we tend to deal with largely e-commerce companies, but we also work with research companies. How do we do it? I think it's quite a claim to say that we crawl, measure, and rank all the websites on the internet. So why don't I tell you a little bit about our history, and that should explain it. We started off in 2009 because our founder's family owns a jewelry store. Being the younger generation, he was asked to take it online. And then one day a friend of his came and asked him, have you ever heard of David Yurman? He said no, and had a look at the website, and was absolutely astonished to see that here was a competitor that he'd never heard of. So he started looking for other competitors he'd never heard of, and he couldn't find a good way to do it. He got together with his friend from school, and together they built a browser plugin called SimilarWeb, which analyzed the websites you were on, found similarities between them, and compared it to other people, and based upon that, they created an algorithm which helped you find similar websites. Hugely successful, 1 million downloads in a couple of months, but unfortunately, they couldn't make any money off of it. So what they did was they opened up a website called SimilarSites.com and did the same thing and became publishers. It was an okay business, but something really interesting happened then. They were approached by a couple of large analytics companies asking to buy that data. So they had 1 million users with anonymized data, and they wanted to get that data to begin analyzing it. So they said, okay, great, and started selling it to them. And they asked for more. And they said, how are we going to get more? We know how to do one thing, and that's how to create browser plugins. And that's what they did. They started copying the biggest browser plugins on the web, some successfully, some not. And they were bankrolled by these other companies. Eventually, once they had enough money, they bought out the ones they couldn't compete with. And that brings us to date. Today, we are the proud owners of over 5,000 different browser plugins, extensions, and add-ons. We have over 50 million users with one of our plugins installed on them. And we supplement that data with a crawler. Think about an election. If there was an election in Turkey tomorrow, actually maybe elections in Turkey aren't the greatest subject to touch. If there was an election in the UK tomorrow, then I guess the way it would work is they'd call 1,000 people, based upon their answers, who would be the next prime minister. They'd be able to estimate to a high degree of certainty how that would work. So we have the exact same thing, just rather than doing it for politicians, we do it for websites, and very, very soon apps as well. So what happens is we have our 50 million users, we know how they behave, we then run our estimation algorithms to do our forecasting, we then compare it to a list of websites of 20,000 publishers which have shared their data with us, and that enables us to compare our accuracy, and that's when we release the data. Now, once we have that, we can tag, categorize, rank, and pretty much show you all the information I'm going to show you now. I'm going to go fairly quickly because I understand we're running slightly late, and I'm hungry, I'm sure all of you are. So you can all come up to me or to Haluk, our local partner, later, ask us as many questions as you want. Stat number 1, 46.3% of Turks are online, and in Turkey we see over 840,000 different websites. But this is a really interesting bit. Turks absolutely love the news websites. Over 30% of the top 20 are news, which is almost double what we see in other places. Now, despite the social challenges which I met yesterday, or maybe in spite of it, you absolutely love being social. You're one of the top 10 Twitters, you're number 11 on Facebook, meaning you're the 11th largest country, and Instagram, really? You like pictures? Another key change, again, this is very, very different from Europe. What we tend to see in Europe is the Google dominance, and that's why they keep on getting hit again and again and again by the regulator. We see a slightly different picture in Turkey. What happens is Google is obviously the dominant player, but we see an increase in Yandex. And actually, we see it growing more and more and more. And I did speak to someone from Yandex earlier, and they have a couple of tricks up their sleeve, which probably will help increase this as well. We can see that strategic importance of Turkey to Yandex. This is all using our data, which is available online on SimilarWeb.com. Pretty much everything you see here is we pulled from there directly. And what you can see is number 1 for Yandex is Russia, number 2 is Ukraine, number 3 is Turkey. I guess the question becomes how soon will they begin monetizing that and creating sponsored ads in this country? Online stores. Now, I know this is when it gets slightly tense. I hope no one throws any shoes at me. But what we can see is that Sahib Bindin, which I believe means I sell or selling by owner, is very, very dominant in this market. I know all of you know this, but to the best of my understanding, this is the first time you actually have stats to prove that point. Some of the top shopping keywords. Again, my Turkish is very, very poor, but you love your brands, which we can see very, very clearly here. Another interesting fact, games. This may be because of the relatively young population of Turkey, but you absolutely love your online games. And I actually was speaking to Baris yesterday, who sold to a very large Korean publisher about games. It's a huge market here. It's a lot bigger than gambling, for example. So we see that although I see old men typically playing cards in the lots of coffee shops in Istanbul, apparently you don't really go and gamble online. That's not your thing. Playing games, much, much bigger. Some of the top searches in the country, again, as we'd expect, YouTube, Facebook, and some of the other films. And some of the trending searches, again, I don't watch much Turkish TV, but apparently I really need to see the series. Another one, the Discovery 2, I believe it's part of one of the sponsors here, Turkcell, is somewhat related to that. And now let's touch on the leaders. When we look at e-commerce, we can see something very, very different to Europe. What we tend to see in Europe is we see the American companies and now also beginning of the Chinese dominance of companies in Europe. Turkey is very, very different. I think it's quite interesting that they've managed to keep local companies present, and actually they're the one who are the market leaders. We look much lower down the list, and only there do we see the Amazon, the AliExpress, and the eBay. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. And I expect that gap to widen, and actually for those companies to begin to diversify. I want to mention something here because I promised someone I would. Number 7 on the airlines, Unur Air, they recently changed domains, and that's why they're relatively low here. I apologize, this was my mistake, no one else's. But generally what we can see, again, what we see in Turkey is the dominance of the Turkish airliners. This is very, very different to what we see in Europe. In Europe, we typically see the top national carrier. So if we were talking about Germany, it would be Lufthansa, followed by others, say EasyJet and Ryanair. Whereas in Turkey, we see actually pretty much everyone is Turkish for the top 5. When it's hotels, it's slightly different. What we can see is Booking.com is number 1 by a margin. And apparently, I've been told that this is a review, the number 2, Sikir Taval. And I don't know why. This hotel's hospitality has been great, but people keep on complaining about hotels, which I found fairly interesting about Turkey. When we look at the bigger travel picture, again, the OTA, its tour, is much higher than most of the other foreign companies. But Skyscanner, which is a fairly newcomer to the market, has managed to pick up quite a lot of market share. Finance. Again, no surprises here. Guarantee Bank, followed by AS Bank. And I saw Guarantee Bank, and I was interested to see how they've maintained their dominance. And apparently, they've been doing quite a lot of television advertising. And the way we can see that is an increase in the direct traffic going to the website. Someone sees a television advertisement, comes online. And we can see more and more of that, of the offline activity promoting online activity. The second interesting trend we're seeing across all the banks in Turkey is a reduction in the amount of traffic. And the reason is because it's going mobile. It seems that the banks are embracing mobile banking, which is a trend that we're seeing in other places as well. News, Hurriyet, also some of our customers lead the pack, but not very far from Milliyet. but it's those two, and pretty much everyone is far behind. Mobile is going to be absolutely a huge player here, especially mobile apps. We see this again and again and again. The growth of apps in publishing is going to be fundamental. When you think about, I left my phone there, but when we think about the phones and how we now consume news, we tend to consume it on the fly in the multiple traffic jams of Istanbul, and we tend to read it on an app because it's a nicer experience than reading it online. Telecom, the proud sponsors, Turkcell are leading. Number 2 is Vodafone. Again, I don't think there are any big surprises here, but you can begin quoting this information and saying we now have stats to prove what we've been thinking for a long time. Social networks, Facebook is absolutely huge, Twitter again, and as we go along, we see the same thing. The one thing which did surprise me is that Pinterest isn't as big here as it would be in other places. We see a lot of shopping websites taking advantage of Pinterest because it gets a lot of engagement. I don't know, I think that may be an interesting opportunity in Turkey. And finally, because I expected us to be running a little bit late, we've compiled this report for you, which you can all get online, landing/Turkey. And I've always been told not to come with not bearing gifts, so we've also given a 10% discount for this month, or sorry, for next month, which you need to speak to Haluk about, and that will enable you to test this out for a lot cheaper. Thank you very much. I hope we can now leave for lunch a little bit earlier than expected. Thank you for your time, thank you for your patience, and any questions, please contact Haluk, who's our local representative here. Thank you.